Hey friends, I spent 2 full days at the Quilt Expo in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I want to share with you some of the quilts that caught my eye. Hope you enjoy. This was definitely in my top 5. This is called Tears for Tahlequah by Karen Selk. She writes, I live on an island in the Salish Sea, which spans from Vancouver, British Columbia to Seattle, Washington. It is the home of the endangered J-pod resident orca whales. In July 2018, the whale named Tahlequah gave birth to what appeared to be a healthy baby that died within hours. Tahlequah grieved the loss by carrying and pushing her dead baby on her head for 17 days, while her family members helped to feed her as they traveled. With no viable births since 2015 and 13 deaths in the last 6 years, the orcas in these waters are in extreme danger. We must protect their preferred food sources, diminish underwater noise, and reduce toxic pollutants which affect orca populations. This is Lilies of the Valley by Sarah Ann Smith. She writes, although I was middle-aged when we moved to Maine, it has become home to my soul and my art. But climate change is affecting the state. 75% of maple syrup production was once south of the Canadian border, but now those percentages have reversed, with the U.S. supplying only 25%. Lobsters are also moving north as the climate warms. Late every spring, I look for the lilies of the valley, which are called May blooms in German. I wonder, with climate change and global warming, will they become known as April blooms? This is Haiku by Darcy Fox. She writes, calm among chaos, pieces of the parts at heart, magic of quilting. Is hand embroidered on the bottom of the quilt. The art of quilting has really kept me going during the uncertainty of the last few years. I used many scraps of other quilts I made over 2020 to 2021. This is called Night on the Town by Renata Beeson. She says this is an original design representing Art Deco. The techniques I used were paper piecing, applique, cording, and piping. I used metallic hand-sewn thread to accent the background crystals for the lights, and a combination of bamboo and polyester batting to add volume. I won't lie, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the title of this quilt, but it is made by Wendy Anon, and she writes, I chose Tamara de Lempicka as my inspiration, as she was one of the most influential Art Deco artists of the era. I enjoy paper piecing with freezer paper on top of the fabrics to piece by machine. Some Inktense pencils helped to realize the painted look. This is Louise the Owl, pieced by Catherine Swetnam and quilted by Amanda Lightfoot. The artist writes, I enjoy foundation paper piecing and found this guy online when looking for an inspiration for owls. Louise the Owl by Marianne Knops of Quilt on Z in the Netherlands was just too striking for me to resist. I absolutely love cherry blossoms, so this quilt really spoke to me, especially when I looked to see how teeny tiny those little blossoms really were. This is called the North Springfield Cherry Tree, pieced and quilted by Susan Novak, and they have written on the statement piece a poem called Fallen Petals by Serena Fusek. The curator writes, the quilt features not only beautiful cherry blossoms, but the printed words evoke the talking her song line from the poem, after he leaves, also from the poem. Susan's quilt has stark contrast between color and black and white, which mimic the loneliness she feels as the petals fall. This is called The Touch. It is pieced and quilted by Emma Allen. The curator writes, the two figures stretching to touch in this quilt evokes the effort portrayed by Cheryl Cooley in the poem Otherness to reconcile inner and outer selves. In the quilt, yin and yang are represented by female and male figures. In the poem, age and youth struggle for adolescence. And the artist has a statement that says the poem ends with, maybe, just maybe, you'll be close enough to shine together, which is pretty much what is happening in the quilt. This is Melancholy Thistle, pieced and quilted by Robin Gregg. During quarantine, we watched many episodes of Poirot. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing that right. And I was enamored with the 20s Art Deco vibe. This challenge encouraged me to design and explore the genre. This is called Endless. It is pieced by James Harper and quilted by Jackie Brown, and they are members of the Trinity Valley Quilters Guild. This is part of the Best of North Texas Quilt Festival from 2021, and the statement says, I started this quilt in an initial class. Took me almost a full year to complete the top. A real challenge for me being a new quilter. I'm overjoyed on being able to finish this quilt. This is a foundation paper piecing pattern from Jacqueline de Jong. This is I Want to Ride My Bicycle, pieced by Suzanne Garcia and quilted by Sabina Thompson, members of the Fort Worth Quilt Guild. The artist writes, growing up, my family used to ride bikes to the edge of town. The highlight was seeing an apiary with many beehives. As we rode, we passed many of the same scenes that are on this quilt. Oh my goodness, I have a fascination with all forms of marine life, so this one really spoke to me. This is called Jumping for Joy, pieced and quilted by Doreen Beck. It is part of the Best of North Texas Quilt Festival from 2021, and the artist writes, Quilt created for challenge, Freedom Turning 21 Challenge. Jumping for Joy portrays a humpback whale breaching the surface of the water in the moonlight. To me, they seem to be reveling in the sheer joy of the experience. This is called Cala Lilly. It is designed by Marjan Kalupful. I'm sure I chopped that name up. And it is pieced, appliqued, and quilted by Anne Kazampo. The artist writes, while attending the Mid-Atlantic Quilt Festival in 2014, I learned that there was a place open in a class offered by Karjan entitled Cala Lilly, one of my very favorite flowers. I signed up on the spot, made a quick trip to the show vendors, purchased several yards of hand-dyed fabric, borrowed essential tools from a friend, and got to work. It remains in the seasonal rotation of my quilts on display in my home. Oh my goodness, this one was definitely in my top 5 favorite. It's called Tangled Stars. It's pieced and quilted by Lori Dickman. Lori writes, my Art Deco Tangled Stars quilt was inspired by a similar block in my EQ8 software, which I enlarged. Stars have always been a favorite design in the Art Deco world, and my quilt uses jewel tone batiks on a light batik background and free motion hand-guided quilting on my long arm. This is Plight of the Monarchs by Kathy Puente. Every autumn, monarch butterflies migrate from the U.S. to Mexico, where they hibernate in trees for the winter. They make the flight back every spring. In both seasons, hundreds of thousands of monarch butterflies fill the sky and land in my backyard for a rest and meal, beckoning me to enjoy their beauty. Monarchs need warmth to survive, and due to the changing climate, monarch butterflies are being drastically reduced, with fewer and fewer of them actually making it to their hibernation habitat. Everyone can be a part of the solution. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a webpage dedicated to the monarch butterfly with information on how individuals, communities, and the agriculture industry can help. This is Vintage Christmas, pieced by Cynthia Berend and quilted by Carol Hose. They are members of the Quilters Guild of Arlington, and this is part of the Best of North Texas Quilt Festival from 2021. It is called Vintage Christmas. It's following the Vintage Christmas pattern from Lori Holt. She said, I saw this quilt and I loved it, but I did not realize at the time that the blocks were 6.5 inches, which was challenging for me. Here's another quilt from the Best of North Texas Quilt Festival 2021. It's called Magic Quilt Show. It's pieced and quilted by Christine Weiss, who is a member of the Quilters Guild of Arlington. She writes, there's magic in every quilt. You can see all the spells cast for this one in the sparkling fabrics and hand embroidery. Images were drawn and colored. This is Wish Upon a Star, also from the Best of North Texas Quilt Festival 2021, pieced and quilted by Jackie Stockler. She is a member of the Trinity Valley Quilters Guild, and she just writes, "The circle motif in this quilt really intrigued me." I saw this one while I was sitting at the table eating my lunch, and it just beckoned me to come take a closer look. This is another Best of North Texas Quilt Festival. It is pieced and quilted by Leo Ransom, who is a member of the Fort Worth Modern Quilt Guild. Leo wrote, "I love taking leftover fused pieces from other projects to make something new and original with thumbnail to quarter-size pieces to create a portrait." This one to me just screamed Simba. So if it was mine, I probably would have called it Simba. But Leo's good too. Another Best of North Texas, this is the English Garden Cottage quilt, pieced by Sue Gray and Carol Cook and quilted by Bonnie Sloan. This kit was purchased in 2001 when I started it, but my dad died and I put it away, and Carol finished it as a surprise. Sue is a member of the Irving Quilt Guild. Here's another quilt from Carol Cook. This time it is quilted by Janie Merritt. It is called Let It Be. Carol writes, "Inspired by the show theme, I took different elements from tattoo art I found online and created this design. The words are from my favorite Beatles song, Let It Be." Here is a quilt that was pieced by Kim Olmedo and quilted by Pat Madrid. Kim is a member of the Quilters Guild of Arlington, and she called this my COVID 365 day challenge. This was a block a day challenge, which I never would have finished if COVID had not happened. Working from home during COVID allowed me to sew daily. I started piecing on January 1st, 2020, and I finished piecing on December 31st, 2020. This is a Judy Niemeyer design that is pieced and quilted by Gloria Goddard, who is a member of the Trinity Valley Quilters Guild out of North Texas. This is called Vintage Rose, and the artist writes, "Judy Niemeyer's patterns are beautiful and challenging. I did change the border to something that I preferred." This one is called the Summer Light Brigade, and it is from Diane Melms from Anchorage, Alaska. She writes, "On warm summer nights, the flickering glow of fireflies would light up my backyard of my family home. The magical sight left me mesmerized as these tiny flying lights blinked their way into my heart. However, today fireflies are disappearing, threatened by habitat loss, light pollution, pesticides, and even commercial harvesting. We can conserve firefly populations by protecting biodiversity hotspots that support firefly species and by prohibiting the harvesting of wild fireflies. We can also turn off our outside lights, reduce our use of toxic chemicals, and create natural firefly habitats. I hope these fabulous fluorescent friends will be around for future generations. The world would not be so bright without fireflies to watch at night." There were a ton of quilts to see, and not all of them were represented in this video. Just the ones that caught my eye. Of course, no trip to the expo is complete without stopping by and playing on the long arms, and so I'm going to close this video with a little bit of footage showing you Tucker just doing his thing on a handy quilter machine. This kid is seriously talented, and he does take commission work. So if you want to check out his YouTube channel, I will link it in the first comment down below. Thanks for watching, guys.